support.
The maestro, please.
End of July, and boy do we have a hot and steamy one for you today. We'll be looking at 7 by Jung Kook featuring Latto.
Jung Kook.
Jung Kook, better known simply by his last name, Jung Kook, is actually a member of BTS, and we went over them not too long ago when we did
Get it, let it roll. Smooth like butter. Pour you in like no other.
Since BTS is on hiatus due to some of the members' mandatory military service in South Korea, many of the members have started solo careers like Jung Kook. He's had a couple of hits already, such as
Look who we are the dreamers, we make it happen.
or even more recently with
Please you stay alive.
Latto.
Alyssa Stevens, now known as Latto, is no stranger to the pop scene as well, despite being a rapper. Her biggest hit was when she did
I can tell you got big, deep energy. It ain't too many niggas that can handle me, but I might let you try it out.
and she's even been able to repeat the success with such hits more recently, like
Bitches set it up, then put it on the floor. I don't know what y'all been told.
Background.
7 was originally released on July 14th of 2023, charting just a week and a half later, going all the way to number 1. Helping it get up there were a number of digital EP collections that were released. The original collection has both the clean and explicit versions of the song, even going so far as to give the explicit version an alternate cover, as well as the official instrumental. 2 more were released, starting with the weekday version, which has all the previous versions that I mentioned, as well as a summer mix,
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
and a band version.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Lastly, there's a weekend version, which instead of the summer mix and the band version, has an island mix,
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
a nightfall mix,
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
a festival mix,
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday,
and then wraps it all up with a lo-fi mix.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Oddly enough, Jung Kook is not credited as a writer or a producer on this, given Latto does receive writing credits. As for the rest of the credits, we have a bunch of returning hitmakers: Watt, Circuit, John Bellion, and Theron Thomas. We first talked about Andrew Watt way back when we did
Havana, ooh, nah, nah. Half of my heart is in Havana, ooh, nah.
and oddly enough, a second time with the Camila Cabello track, along with Shawn Mendes.
I love it when you call me señorita. I wish I could pretend.
Since then, he's continued to get pop credits on the charts, working with newer pop artists,
I got my peaches out in Georgia. Oh yeah, shit. I get my weed from California. That's that shit. I took
as well as with older ones.
hold me close. Time to dance.
Moving on, we have Circuit, who we also talked about way in the beginning with
I'm a motherfucking star boy.
and then we mentioned him a second time
This girl's like you, roll around with guys like me till sundown when I come through. I need
and even more recently, just last year, for a third time.
Doing something unholy. He's sat back while she's dropping it. She be
Apparently, since we talk about him so frequently, he actually doesn't have any other pop hits that we haven't mentioned. Next up, we have John Bellion, who we also mentioned back when we did
Those dreams bring back all the memories of everything we've been through.
Since then, he's gotten some more pop credits like
Feel so holy, 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 holy.
and he's even worked with other K-pop artists.
On the ground. Everything I need is on the ground.
Finally, we have Uptown AP, Theron Thomas himself, first talking about him when we did
It's about damn time. In a minute, I'ma need a sentimental man or woman to pump me up.
and then extremely recently, just this year when we did
all my life. They be trying to.
And since it was so recent, we actually don't have anything else to talk about for him. 7 is released solely by Big Hit.
Form.
7 is listed as a UK garage and pop hit, is just over 3 minutes long, is in B major, and is 125 beats per minute. After the quick intro, Jung Kook gives us the first verse,
Weight of the world on your shoulders.
the first pre-chorus,
It's the way that you can ride. It's the way that you can ride.
and then the first chorus.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
He then continues to give us a second verse,
You love when I jump right in. All of me, I'm a foreign.
a second pre-chorus,
You're up around me and you give me life.
and then a twice as long second chorus.
Every hour, every minute, every second, you know.
We then finally get Latto's verse, which also functions as a bridge and is also twice as long as either of Jung Kook's verses.
Tight to take control, tight to take your soul. Take your phone and put it in the camera roll.
We then get the third chorus, still twice as long as the first,
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 7 days a week.
and that ultimately ends the song.
Night after night, I'll be fucking you for 7 days a week.
Guitar.
The main harmonic figure in the song, and the instrument that plays the most, and the instrument that starts off the song, doing these broken chords, going E major 7, D sharp dominant 7, G sharp minor, F sharp minor 7, and then B major. The guitar pretty much repeats exactly that throughout the entirety of the song, although there is this one point in the song where it gets chopped up for a bit of a different rhythm.
Pad.
The first harder pad that we hear does play basically what the guitar was doing, but a bit simplified. No sevenths here. Starting off with a G sharp minor, going to an F double sharp diminished, don't worry about those symbols, a G sharp minor, then going down chromatically to a G natural minor before hitting that F sharp minor, and then hitting that B major at the end. The second, a bit softer pad we hear right after that pretty much does the same thing, but when it repeats that G sharp minor chord, it goes one step further and makes it a G sharp minor 7, just to give a bit more flavor to it.
Bass.
The bass is pretty simplistic, mostly playing the root notes of the chords that the guitar was playing at the very beginning, starting off on that low E, dropping to D sharp, going up to the G sharp, and working its way to that F sharp through that G natural before finally hitting that B at the end. The bass pretty much does that throughout, except in this one instance where it has these repeated quarter notes accompanying these 8th and 16th note syncopated figures, given the notes it is playing are still pretty much the same.
Synth.
A number of synths pop up through the song. The first two happening right here, we have that high B that's held out through the entirety of the phrase, and we have this lower one that sounds quite similar to the bass and actually does a similar syncopated 16th note figure and plays the same notes. Later on near the end of the song, we have this one almost piano-like synth that's very buried in the mix, but if you listen carefully, you can hear its heavily syncopated rhythms. It's quite a nice addition, especially when the texture is a bit thinner, and it has quite a large range, starting off on that high G sharp and working its way down all the way to that low D sharp.
Verse.
The verse starts off quite simplistic, mostly just 8th notes and quarter notes with the occasional melisma, and has Jung Kook in the lower part of his range.
Weight of the world on your shoulders. I kiss your waist and ease your mind.
As the first verse continues, we don't get as much space, especially when he's doing these longer melismas, but he's still pretty low in his register.
I must be favored to know, yeah. I take my hands and trace your lines.
Once we get to the second verse, we change rhythms completely, mostly focusing on just these eighth note rhythms and still low in Jung Kook's range.
You love when I jump right in. All of me, I'm a foreign. Show you what devotion is. Deeper than the ocean is.
Not as much variation here, minus the one change on Deeper Than the Ocean Is.
Wind it back, I'll take it slow. Leave you with that afterglow. Show you what devotion is. Deeper than the ocean is.
Once we get to Latto's verse, obviously she is just rapping, but she chooses more to focus on these syncopated 16th note rhythms, as well as those triplet eighth notes at the end.
Tight to take control, tight to take your soul. Take your phone and put it in the camera roll. Leave them clothes at the door. What you ain't for? Better come and hit your goal.
She then repeats that same idea, given we don't have as much syncopation and more 16ths, but we still have those tripled eighth notes at the end.
He jumping in both feet. Going to the sun up, we ain't getting no sleep. 7 days a week, 7 different sheets, 7 different angles, that could be your fantasy.
As we continue on in her verse, notice her rhythms become a bit more spaced out, and we have a couple more quarter notes as opposed to eighths or 16ths.
Open up, say, ah. Come here, baby, let me swallow your pride. What you want, I can match your vibe. Hit me up and I'ma cha-cha slide.
She then ends her verse, choosing to more focus on eighth notes than 16ths, given we still have some in there, quite similar to how Jung Kook's verses were, more eighth notes than 16ths.
You make Mondays feel like weekends. I make him never think about cheating. Got you skipping work and me. Fuck it, let's sleep in. Yeah.
Pre-chorus.
The pre-chorus, done entirely by Jung Kook, has him rapping, doing mostly syncopated 16ths, just like Latto does in her verse, given we do have those O's up top with the additional vocals.
It's the way that you can ride. It's the way that you can ride. Think I'm meant to win another life, so break me up another time.
In the second half of the pre-chorus, we go back to Jung Kook singing though, and his range is fairly expanded, hitting that B on the middle of the staff and going as low as that G sharp way below, and of course we still have his melismas.
You wrap around me and you give me life, and that's why night after night I'll be fucking you right.
The second pre-chorus is essentially identical, minus the ending, which he goes all the way up, hitting that high D sharp before dropping to the C sharp right below it.
You wrap around me and you give me life, and that's why night after night I'll be fucking you right. Monday, Tuesday,
Chorus.
The chorus is pretty simplistic and very catchy. It's mostly all eighth notes staying on the lower end of Jung Kook's range, with some chorus vocals going a week to make things a bit more interesting.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 7 days a week.
The second phrase pretty much repeats that, except instead of days, we're doing units of time, although we do get a light melisma and we do get a different ending to finally end the phrase.
Every hour, every minute, every second, you know night after night I'll be fucking you right 7 days a week.
The chorus pretty much stays the same, but every time it comes back, there is something different about it, most often in the form of ad-libs or other layered vocals. Like in the second chorus at the beginning, it's pretty much the same, except at the very end on 7 days a week, where we have Jung Kook in octaves with himself.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 7 days a week.
Or in the following phrase, where we get this additional ad-lib at the very end, with a slight different rhythm, and obviously Jung Kook is much higher in his range.
Every hour, every minute, every second, you know night after night I'll be fucking you right 7 days a week.
Like I said, the second chorus is actually repeated, and we have this lovely line that he goes once we get to Thursday, mostly staying on that A sharp before working his way up and then back down to that G sharp. And then we have those ad-libs at the end on right before 7 days a week, those ahs.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 7 days a week.
And then finally at the end of the second chorus, we have those lovely ad-libs of him over top on Night After Night and Fucking You Right.
Every hour, every minute, every second, you know night after night I'll be fucking you right 7 days a week.
Moving to the final chorus, we have that 7 days a week line that ties the end of Latto's verse into the final chorus, and we have him doing this long melisma throughout before he finally drops out and comes back on 7 days a week, again an octave higher.
Sleep in, yeah.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 7 days a week.
The following phrase, we get this one bar of ad-libs before doing the night after night and fucking you right line, but now in harmony.
Every hour, every minute, every second, you know, night after night, I'll be fucking you right 7 days a week.
Moving to our last couple of phrases, we have that lovely line on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday where he hangs on that A sharp before doing some more ad-libs at the very end of the phrase.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 7 days a week.
And finally, to end it all off, he does hit those A sharps on hour and minute and a nice melisma on second before he finally drops out and the song finally ends.
Every hour, every minute, every second, no night after night, I'll be fucking you for 7 days a week.
So there you have it, our second K-pop song, thankfully again in English. I did not have to transcribe Korean or even try to Romanize it, which I'm not looking forward to if I ever have to do. Regardless, this being our second K-pop song and our second BTS-related song, I'm really starting to get the hype behind them. These songs are so well crafted and well produced. Even within the chorus, it did repeat a lot, but every time it came back, those added elements, those little extras, whether it was layered vocals or just ad-libs, really do keep your ears invested. They keep you interested in the song. You might almost be able to listen to this song.
Sleeping, yeah.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 7 days a week. Every hour, every minute, every second, you know, night after night, I'll be fucking you right 7 days a week.
I actually didn't know what version of the song to look at, the explicit or the clean version. I typically do the explicit version in every case, because why do you have a clean version if the original is not explicit? At the same time, all of the remixes were done off the clean lyrics, which I get for airplay purposes and radio play, but at the same time, why would you have the explicit version if you don't have the clean one? Given they give the explicit version a different cover, I don't know, I feel like we're having the same issue that we had with that Enrique Iglesias song, Tonight I'm... Well, even the title is different whether you're listening to the clean or the explicit one.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.